In the name of God, the Creator, the Redeemer, and the Sustainer. Amen. According to the Labor Department, the average yearly salary in the state of California is just shy of $80,000. If I asked every single person in our church right now, suppose you had an extra $80,000 lying around, what should be done with that money? I bet I would have a lot of different answers. That's the topic of conversation in the gospel today that takes place at a dinner party with some familiar characters in Jesus' ministry. The dinner party celebrates the newly raised Lazarus from the dead, his sisters, Mary and Martha, and of course, the disciples. I suppose at first the scene contains much of the normal routines of this group. There's a dinner, Martha is serving, there's miracles. But recent events have turned up the drama, and what was simmering is now at a low boil. And for those who know how the story unfolds, we can't help but hear that the crucifixion is starting to press in. The perfume in question at the party is an expensive one. A whopping 300 denarii was about a year's wages in Jesus' time, akin to just shy of $80,000 today. That's a lot of money, especially for perfume. It's so expensive that you would probably hold the jar with 2 hands. It's so expensive that people would probably hold their breath and be very, very still as it walked by. It's so expensive that eyes would probably follow it along the room as Mary carried it. Where Mary got the money for this, we don't know. As a female living in Bethany, she was permitted to work in the trades, so perhaps this is from her hard-earned money, or perhaps it's a combined retirement plan between the siblings. Perhaps it's a gift. Who knows? We don't know, and that's not the point anyway. The point is that it's expensive, and for people living in this time period, completely extravagant. It's an unbelievable amount of money for a bottle of perfume. A modest house in a small village might cost around the same price or even less. With 300 denarii, someone could buy several sheep or goats or a pair of oxen, which they could use to start a business that could sustain them for the rest of their lives. It could buy between 8,000 and 10,000 loaves of bread, or enough grain to sustain a family for months. It could hire a servant for a whole year. Judas tells us loud and clear what he thinks should be done with the perfume: sold and given to the poor. In this time period, the Jewish temples managed gifts and created a system for distributing money for the poor. Alms were given in the temple and then given out from there. And so in ways, Judas is just arguing that the gift be given through a proper channel, which makes sense. And I think how many of us think when we give to an organization, we want to make sure that it's going to go where we say we want it to go. Judas represents an orderly system, a following of the rules of right action. And he has a valid point, but then it's quickly undermined by his motives, and that kind of ruins it for him. But I think the point to the desire that we all have, that when we have something that's precious, something of value or worth, we treat it in a certain way. We treat it with care. We protect it. We make sure it's used for the desired purposes. I was talking with a friend recently who was helping her parents move out of her childhood home. And when her parents were married, they got gifts of china and silver and linens. And her mother used to keep all of those items in a locked room in the kitchen. Because in the event that they would leave the house and someone would break into the house, the person who was stealing at least couldn't get the china. There's this sense of what we have and that we hold dear. We want it to be safe. We want to protect it, to use it for what it was intended for. No one buys something of value and thinks, well, I really don't care what happens to this. Both Judas and Mary look at the same bottle of perfume worth 300 denarii, and they both see something totally different. Judas sees the cost, 300 denarii, and thinks of all that it could buy him. But Mary sees the perfume and sees the love she has for Jesus. Jesus has just raised her brother from the dead, which I think we can all believe was as radical and as miraculous and as mind-blowing as it sounds. And they're all there celebrating together. Her brother is not dead, but alive, turned sadness into joy. If I was hosting a dinner party for someone who had just brought my beloved back to life, I would fork over a yearly salary too. Wouldn't you? Here, let me unlock the china cabinet for you. Here's the keys to my car. Because what is worth far more than anything we own? The life of someone that we love. It's incredible, really, that Mary sees Jesus the way that she does, because this is before the resurrection. This act of devotion to Jesus is before his followers really know who he is. Maybe Mary can see it before anyone else can, because Mary loves him in a way that is completely unreasonable. She dumps out the entire bottle in one sitting. Can you hear the crowd gasp at how foolish this is? But her action in a way is so pure because all love is completely foolish. It makes absolutely no sense, and that's what makes it love. It's so beautiful. This gospel story is one that also occurs in Mark's gospel, which we looked at our 9 a.m. hour as we were continuing this study of women in the Gospels. And we looked at the story of women at the crucifixion and the burial of Jesus this morning. And we looked especially at Mark's gospel because I think one of the most underappreciated elements of his gospel is that women tend to get or see what the disciples can't see. Women tend to do what the disciples fail to do in Mark's gospel. In Mark's gospel, the disciples flee the scene right after Jesus' rest in the garden. In the earliest manuscripts, the disciples are never heard from again. But the women follow Jesus through the hardest parts of the journey, and the women show up to the resurrection. The women can see something that the disciples didn't. Judas sees the rules. Judas sees what he can get out of this bottle of perfume. Judas sees a system, but not Mary. Mary sees the real Jesus, and her sacrifice, in a way, is so foolish. It's a colossal waste, really. She could have had her own house. She could have been wise. She could have been generous. She could have played by the rules. Except if we see this as an act of love and devotion, in which case, who's to say it's wasted? Jesus doesn't see it as that, because Jesus sees what Mary sees: wild, free, pure, sacrificial love. Jesus, whose life I can only assume is worth much more than 300 denarii, has also found something worth sacrificing everything for. And that's us. It makes no sense because it's the type of completely unreasonable love that is only reasonable to the person who loves. We are Jesus' beloved, and for him, we're worth everything. Despite all the ways in we mess up, his love for us leads him to sacrifice everything. The last 2 weeks of Lent is known as Passion Tide, and our gospel today is certainly one of passion, of Mary's passion for Jesus, which foreshadows the story of the crucifixion. And as the great prophet Isaiah whispers us today, a new thing is coming. Can you not perceive it? Amen.